Heather Taylor from EY was going to join us. She wasn't able to make it, and so we have the dreaded Mantle. We worked on gender diversity across the panels today. This one we have to compromise on our collective intelligence. There's actually a study out of MIT's Sloan School of Management, Tom Malone, my colleague, that showed that the collective intelligence of a group increases linearly with the number of women in it. So this is the dumbest possible group of people that we could have. What we're going to talk about now is hard to decarbonize industrial sectors, how we can decarbonize them, and how we can leverage the power of markets to enable that to happen. We have talked today about energy, we've talked about AI, we've talked about nature, we've talked about direct air capture. When we look at the global portfolio of carbon emissions and the kinds of things that are driving it, there are some key industrial commodities that are that are critical components and which are persistently difficult. And what's exciting about this panel is that these are folks who are leveraging the power of carbon markets, of new kinds of infrastructure solutions to try to go after some of these challenges. So I'm going to first invite Saman to just paint a picture here for us. What is the domain we're talking about here in terms of commodity emissions, and why is that an important focus?
Thanks, Jason. Hey, everyone. I'm Salman Baghdastani, recent MIT graduate, co-founder and CEO of S3 Markets. We are on a mission to accelerate low-carbon modes of production. And we're going to do that by providing $100 billion in revenue support directly to low-carbon producers. We're going to begin with steel, cement, and ammonia. Because let's start with the good news. The good news is that at the global level, the sources of emissions are very well understood. It's a few handfuls of commodities like cement production, steel production, ammonia production that contribute just those 3 to 20% of all global emissions. At the corporate level, there isn't any one particular commodity that makes up any more than a single-digit percentage of their footprint. So the other good news is that the solutions largely exist. In fact, just here within the climate scale-up cohort, we have zero-carbon steel. There's a zero-carbon concrete producer that's also floating about in here. So the solutions exist. That's a great thing. Now, the mixed news is that a lot of times these solutions tend to be far more expensive than their dirty incumbents. But not because they are structurally more expensive. It's actually because they're early in their learning curves and their scale curves. Now, the bad news is that a lot of companies have yet to fully internalize the fact that their emissions and their value chains are being driven by these root drivers of emissions, things like cement, steel, and ammonia. So for example, if you're a cola company, you wouldn't ever think that ammonia is in your footprint, but it is, because you need corn syrup to sweeten your soft drink. The corn syrup needs corn to be grown in fields. That then needs fertilizer, which requires, ta-da, ammonia. So that's kind of the challenge, is getting companies to really internalize that fact and to actually get behind, sort of funding the scale up of those already existing solutions. And so that's what we're going to do at S3 Markets through a book and claim system, which I'll tell you all a little bit more about here in just a bit.
Yeah, and I should also just add that oftentimes the immediate purchaser of that commodity is a low margin business, right? Whether that's an agricultural producer or a steel manufacturer, and so their ability to shoulder that price premium, that green premium, is limited. There might be other companies in the value chain or in the world or other entities, government and so on, that have the some of the capital or cash flow to do it, but they're separated out from the problem. So that's kind of a kind of key issue here. Jean-Baptiste, you've been working in the hydrogen space,
yep.
Which is an example of a key ingredient in making green steel, right? In making green ammonia, right? To decarbonize a couple of these, this is a critical element. But H2 is also itself a commodity that needs to be decarbonized, because we can make it in a gray way or a blue way or a green way. What have you learned about how to route the money needed to get green hydrogen off the ground?
Yeah, thanks for that. So my name is Jean-Baptiste. Indeed, I work with the Debbie Group, and we have a portfolio of about 4.5 gigawatts of electrolysis. So ready to deploy, literally. I mean, we can do it. We do that in countries like in Oman, in Egypt, in Morocco. Why? Energy is cheap, and we all know, that's the basis of decarbonization and these producing these green molecules. You need to get to these locations where the energy is available, where there's space, where you can scale up, and where it's cheap. The issue right now, and here's the thing, is that we are indeed ready to serve these markets that we just said. The ones direct users or the ones that want to decarbonize, but we are in the chain of custody principles. We're subject to mass balancing, and what does that mean? We need to bring that molecule that we make in those very, perfect locations where it's cheap and competitive. We need to bring those all the way to the end user. At the moment, we're starting to scale up, so we need to prove ourselves. But you can imagine that bringing that molecule all the way from Oman to clients in Europe, you need to have all that logistical value chain be established in the media. And so the risk profile is just exploding literally, because you have all the project and project risk, let alone the investments needed to organize import terminals, export terminals, pipeline systems and everything, the regulations, etc. So the capital also available really said, well, this is quite risky. I mean, we're not chipping in yet. So we're in this like chicken and egg issue right now that we cannot really start. So we need to bridge the production project like ourselves to the end clients. So we need these systems to actually decouple and get the environmental attributes accessible to people who are really willing to buy it. I mean, we've seen so many, evidence here today, like Google, who said, I'm ready to buy. So that's actually where it comes down to, and that's where these clever guys here next to me, they're able to do that, to offer that, and I think that's really, really breathtaking.
So there's a couple of interesting points in what you just said. So one is that if we can decouple the environmental benefit and the commodity, then we can, the analogy that's coming to my mind is virtual power purchase agreements for renewable energy. So decarbonization of people's scope 2. In the past 15 years since Google really got this going, is that we sort of buy renewables in one place and use that to sort of count as our objectives. So there's some sort of similar analogous mechanisms that we might be able to invent in the commodity space, a virtual commodity purchase type thing. The other thing that I just want to call out of what you said is that these are value chains. So if we're doing green commodities, it's not just a production site, but eventually these things have to get used. And there are certain places where we need to be simultaneously investing in production and distribution and so on. Regenerative agriculture is an example here where you've got to have sort of people are struggling with that chain of custody sort of question. So Thomas, One Shot Earth has been an innovator in this space of market infrastructure for these types of environmental attributes and commodities. So how are you thinking about this problem space that we've just heard?
Well, we think it's incredibly exciting to unlock the demand, to unlock the scale, to do it at speed. But at the moment, it's happening in the weirdest ways. It's we're siloing all of these solutions, right? Europe has taken this approach of mass balancing, which is that passport that needs to travel with the molecule from the production side all the way to the consumption side. There are concepts that we see, for example, for sustainable aviation fuel, where they've taken this book and claim approach, which is, again, a very separate system. And then you've got carbon markets, which, again, are a separate system. And to really get to speed and scale, we need to focus on interoperability, on transparency, on accountability across all of these systems, so that they can find the right buyer wherever they might be. And so that's the challenge, but also the opportunity.
So you described book and claim like we do in SAF.
Yeah.
This mass balance approach that we heard that's happening in hydrogen, the carbon markets approach. Should we be betting on one of these as the best? Are they horses for courses, and there's different contexts where they're more or less useful? Do we need to sort of spread our bets and try and see and learn?
No, I think we need to create an integration between all of these, so that your certificate can move with that mass balancing passport to a European port, but then the moment it arrives there, switch to a book and claim system, because that is more compatible. For example, that's what the Netherlands is now doing so that they can reach the customers that are too far from a port to consume these molecules, right? And I think creating that interoperability, that the only way that that works is through transparency and auditability. And so we work, for example, with EY. It's a pity that had isn't part of this, but that's why we want third parties to from a known system, right? Capital markets work around that with these, being able to audit things we've solved that part, right? And so tapping into these existing solutions to help scale and speed these solutions up is crucial.
Okay, thank you. Philippe, you're with TPG, major private equity fund. Your portfolio companies include industrials who are at every step of these value chains. TPG Rise is an impact fund that's just working on investing in some of these solutions, some of which are from an earlier era of innovation that are rebirthing themselves, some of which are in growth phases. What are you seeing? Do you agree with this characterization of the challenges, and where do you see the promising solutions?
So I heard the last word, challenge. Challenge is scale. So you're right. So I run the decarbonization portfolio. Major components of the carbon markets. Carbon markets is a $2 billion market. Spot $720 million. The lipstick market is $7 billion. Maybe we should talk about the lipstick market here. It's scandalous because, I was speaking with the current administration, and I'm not going to say names. They pulled out of the Paris Agreement a couple days ago because they said that the new norm is 1.7 Celsius. They also said, why are we calling it the Paris Agreement? And so maybe they want to change the,
Freedom fries.
Exactly. Why don't we change that to another name? But I'm hearing to everybody speak here. We're all very smart, but the actual person who's buying our credits happened not to be in the carbon markets or in climate 4 or 5 years ago. So it's complex. What we spoke here is complex. It's not easy to buy. And then you topple that with the complexity of media pushing a agenda that buying carbon credits is bad because it's greenwashing, when we have folks like Tomas that's actually trying to make a credit go away from a sustainability report to an annual report, technically. That gets corporates scared because now they're accountable to what they're actually disclosing. Or getting sued, like Delta, right? So how do we scale the market? Well, we scale the market by creating good policy. Now, we have geopolitical risk that it's being pushed more to the conservative side, including Canada if Mark Carney, my old boss, doesn't win. So now we have the Global South leading this initiative. And when I say the Global South, that's being funded now by China. And if we look at China, China is actually developing more PhDs in climate than anybody else. So we have 4 years of pause of the Global North. We're going to have funding funneled to Africa. And Africa is leading their G20 this year in South Africa with carbon as being a pillar. We're looking at Ambassador Andrea Correa, who's now the COP30 president as of yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, as pushing carbon also for COP30. Amazon is no longer capturing, but it's actually polluting, which is crazy to say. So that's at the heart of our planet. So it's us to actually push and lead and help on my other hat, which is my UN hat. So I'm the special envoy for sustainable energy for all for climate under the UN. So when I go to the G20 and I do opening remarks, I'm actually the only one speaking about climate. Everybody else is speaking about the Ukraine war, which is extremely important. But climate is actually our biggest war right now. So when I hear about what you just asked me as a question, whether it's on the TPG side or the UN side, we need to know how to have patience in explaining to our corporates that this is a problem today. And the actual folks that are actually suffering the most on this whole drama is actually the Global South. Because the money from the private sector that goes into carbon credits actually gets funneled to the Global South. And I have seen it primarily outside of Sierra Leone, where we actually transitioned a project with carbon credits that helped clean water, and clean water is a huge problem. So I'll stop here. I've been
Yeah. Well, but let me ask you a follow-up question. So does that mean if you think that kind of the energy and the conversation about climate is a China global South conversation, if the U.S. is sort of pulling back, but are they going to be purchasing carbon credits? Are they going to be voluntary market participants in the way that?
Well, that's what they want to push. They're pushing. I mean, they're seeing everybody push back, right? But the problem is that we're avoiding to speak to them. A lot of our U.S. corporates, especially now, I mean, you're seeing Chatham House rules here, but you're seeing a lot of our technology.
I can't guarantee that there is media.
Oh, there is media. Okay, so there are companies that are obviously attending our the inauguration on Monday, right? That were present, and they're scaling back. They're not announcing it, but they're scaling back because they're afraid. So this is it's hard for me. Obviously, I care. I've heard Jay. I heard the previous panelists. We all care about climate. We're in this beautiful scenery here, but we're not helping. So it's for us to kind of demonstrate that there's other ways to bring private capital, whether it's philanthropic, which has been the reason why we're all here. The VCM has been pushed philanthropically. Don't forget all these actual organizations, including the one that I founded, which was the GCMU that partners with ICVCM and VCMI. They're all funded philanthropically. ICVCM, VCMI, GCMU, we're all funded by the same people, including SBTI. That's Bloomberg, IKEA Foundation, Rockefeller. I mean, these have been great people trying to push the climate agenda, but they can't keep on pumping money if we're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's a challenging moment. So, Saman, you hinted that you have some solutions here. So, how are you guys approaching at S3 Markets this set of challenges?
Yeah, so I want to go back to something that Philippe said because it struck a nerve and it really goes to the core of what S3 Markets is trying to do. He said that we need to make high impact, in not so many words, he said we need to make this sort of action accessible to more corporates. And I completely agree. High impact climate action has, for the most part, been only the preserve of climate leaders like Amazon and Google and Meta and others. And it's phenomenal work that they're doing, especially in a period of uncertainty from global standard setters like SBTI. But what S3 Markets is really aiming to do is to make that sort of high impact climate action that only this handful of leaders can take, the sort of action that any company can take. And so here's how we're going to do it. First of all, we built the world's first book and claim system that addresses every single commodity all in one house. We built a stack of capabilities that provides a full suite end-to-end solution that begins with, number one, an AI calculator that can do in minutes and for free what consultants and other companies will charge you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, and will take weeks to do, which is to tell you, here are the commodities that are driving your Scope 3 footprint. So that's number one. Once you know what commodities are driving your Scope 3 footprint, we've done number two, which is vet. We have a stable roster of highly vetted, deeply decarbonized commodity producers, several of which are here in this room, that can make it easy to know where to put your money. And then third, we have created standardized contracts that can make it really easy to quickly design a reliable contract for the environmental attributes that can unlock this work that Demi is describing about and the work that all these decarbonized producers are trying to accomplish. And then finally, we just launched a couple of days ago a transparent registry that provides a full chain of custody so that we can track deal flow and be accountable and tell stakeholders everywhere exactly what substantiates the claims of reduction. So I'll conclude by saying that companies that want to work with S3 Markets have the ability to amplify, aggregate, and focus their climate dollars in high leverage ways that will go to the root drivers of global emissions.
And I'll just say that so that's super cool. And I think many of us who follow climate follow the news about these cool startups, right? There's only a few people who are actual venture capitalists who can invest in them, right? With the new green steel, the new green cement, the new green hydrogen, the new opportunities, or some of the incumbent companies that are doing it. You're creating a way for people to participate in the growth of that new industry in a relatively simplified way. So it's super exciting. Thank you so much to the panel for helping to kind of bring this whole complex world into the room, hopefully in an understandable way. and really appreciate it. And if you want to learn more about S3 or the other companies, you can head to the networking space. Thank you. Cheers.
That's right here.
I have an idea.
It's and we're not my picture. Did not think that so so all that thought we just didn't a picture us there. Why yeah. You get a dice on I think kind of I had to it's not like it's fine. You on that? I don't know. They see it. I think fun right. What?
Oh.
Hold on. You answer. I mean, I really. Thank you.
Is Fred Sal here?